Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday. Welcome to a Shelf Help Club author event with multi-best-selling author, podcast host, speaker, and all-round self-help queen, Gretchen Rubin, who is here today to introduce us to her latest bestseller, Secrets of Adulthood. So Gretchen is a writer who studies and teaches on happiness, good habits, outer order and inner calm, and now how to adult. So hands up if you're here for a bit of support on that. Fresh off a very busy book tour. Welcome, Gretchen. Thank you so much for being here and spending some time with us tonight.
I am so happy to be talking to you. Thanks for letting me join you.
Well, and I don't think I needed to give too much of an intro because you have some serious fans in this group already, including me. And I just mentioned to you that Better Than Before was I think our seventh book at the moment, back in 2018. And
That's so fun.
I just found my original copy and I was looking at all the scribbles in the margins, and not that much has changed. I managed to get some of the habits down, but not all of them yet.
I love going back and seeing what you marked up in an earlier reading of a book, it's always so fascinating to see like the tracks that you left.
I know, yeah. Maybe I'll share later which ones I haven't managed to get. You can give me some advice, but it really
Okay.
is
Oh
it's
yeah.
a total
My
treat.
sister calls me a happiness bully. So yeah, if you give me an opportunity, I can get pretty insistent. So yeah, we can get into it if you want.
We can go there. I love it. A bit of tough love. That's what I need sometimes. But it really is a treat to be hosting you tonight. So, and congratulations on your newest book, baby. Is this number
Yes.
7 or is it just number 7 of
11.
the bestsellers?
Seventh bestseller, 11th book.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. And let us know, chat guys. Get with the chat is open. So who already has a copy of Secrets of Adulthood, because it is out now, or another of Gretchen's books? I know many of you do. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in for our audience. Your mics are off, but you can use the chat to ask questions as we go. And also, if you want to put your cameras on, we love to see your faces. So if you feel brave, please do that. And just before we start, a reminder that the Shelf Help Club is the world's first dedicated self-help book club and community. And we're all about celebrating self-help and working on our inner selves and our mental health. And we are rebranding self-help as self-discovery and something to be done with friends. So, Gretchen,
I
you are
love
in New
that. I
York.
love
You love it?
self-discovery. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
that's like self-help gets a bad rap, doesn't
It
it? A
does.
little
People
bit.
have they use it very dismissively, where it's like it's the greatest project of our lives, and all the ancient philosophers throughout the ages. I mean, yes. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
feel like if I practice and say I say different things to different people and see how it lands. But I'm like a full self-help nerd, so I'm very loud and proud about it. I'll sit on the tube and read all the self-help books. And you are in New York today, so you're back home from the book tour
Yes.
for a little while. And
Yeah.
how are you? And what happens in a day in the life of Gretchen Rubin currently?
Well, it's been a little bit of an upheaval because we just got a new puppy. So we have a 10-week-old puppy. And the way that that affects me most is that I'm a real morning person. And as a writer, I would get up at 5:30, and from like 5:30 to 9 a.m. is my most useful writing time. That's when I do my original work. Or if I have something that's hard, I'll wait and do it in the morning because I'm always much better after I've had a good night's sleep. And the world is quiet, and so I could focus. And so that's when I really do original writing. But our puppy also gets up at 5:30. And so, and my husband is a night person, so he does all this stuff at night. So it's not like
Ah,
he's not doing his share. But I was just thinking, like, we've only had her a couple of weeks, and I was thinking, I need to figure this out because losing my most important writing
yeah.
time isn't something that I want to go on for too much longer. Like now we're getting a better sense of her and she's getting a sense of us, but I got to think that through. So usually that's what I would do is I would start my day by that. Then I would have breakfast, walk my other dog. I have a 10-year-old dog. Um, and then I move into things like a conversation like this, or editing, which is easier than doing original writing, or answering emails, or doing scheduling, or recording a Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast episode, or figuring out what we're going to say on that podcast episode.
Yeah.
Stuff like meeting a friend. I go to the Met every single day, so I would go to the Met.
Yeah.
Um, I watercolor every day. I would do my watercolors. As the day goes on, I try to make things kind of easier and easier because my brain is more and more frayed.
Yeah.
But this puppy is quite an undertaking. But I just remind myself of the happiness research, which I'm sure this group knows well, which is novelty brings happiness, challenge brings happiness, relationships bring happiness, pets make people happier. And so I'm just trusting that in the long run, we will be very, very, very glad that we had Taffy, and she will do a lot to boost our happiness. Even if right now I'm like, okay, when am I going to write my next book? Which I need to figure out.
Yeah, like a beautiful chaos.
Yes, exactly. You got to trust that in the end, you're going to be glad you did it. Yep.
Yeah. And I've mentioned to you that I was listening to a podcast of yours, and because you've been on the road recently and you were talking about how you took care of yourself on the road, and I really liked some of the things that you shared because I think it's great to have all these intentions, isn't it? When you're sitting at home pre-puppy and you've got your time is totally yours and you can plan perfectly and all that kind of stuff, but quite often life just lives, doesn't it? And then we need to adapt our habits and adapt our routines accordingly. So do you mind sharing a few of the things you did to look after yourself?
Yeah, well, one of them is, I'm one of these people who always gets to the airport very early, and so I have all this time in airports. So now I try to get, like, I always aim to try to get 10,000 steps in, and I've gotten like 7,000 steps in just waiting for my flight, to board my flight. And it's a little bit more of a hassle if you're by yourself because you can't go away from your bags, but I just find a little area where nobody's sitting, and I just put my bag in the middle and walk in a circle around it so that if anybody's like, are these unaccompanied bags? I'll be like, no, I'm accompanying those bags.
It's that
And
lady who
listen,
keeps walking around.
yeah, and then I call my parents or a friend, or I listen to a podcast and do it, and then it's a lot easier because I get very restless, and so that makes it a lot easier to be on a flight because I have had a little bit more
Mm,
exercise, and so then it's also a way to use that time, which feels a little bit like a little bit wasted. I don't like to like work that way, like this on this like cramped desk. And
yeah.
another thing I do is that when I'm traveling for work, I always read for fun. So I bring at least 3 books with me in my plane bag because what happens if I finish one and then I don't like one? So you have to have 3 to be safe. Um, and then that's always really nice because that's a huge pleasure. And so now I have it's a way to make traveling for work give me something to look forward to because I'm like, ooh, now that's that chance I have to read this book that I've really been wanting to read.
Yeah, brilliant. A few people, lots of people in the chat are mentioning books of yours that they've read and kind of habits that they've picked up as a result of them. So that's lovely, isn't it?
Oh, well, and some people like Richard is mentioning the 4 tendencies framework. This is my personality framework that divides people into 4 categories. And he's mentioning like didn't remember which one he is. Yeah, there's a free quiz if you just go to GretchenRubin.com and look for the quizzes that will tell you if you're an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. That's super fun. I talk about that in Better Than Before, so maybe people. Then I went ahead and wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah,
But that's a really fun quiz if people I mean, I know you guys are all about self-knowledge
we
and,
are.
self-recognition. So I have several quizzes, which I think like what's your most neglected sense? What is the habit for you right now that would most move the needle for your happiness? Like what's your
Yeah,
habit for happiness? So it's all GretchenRubin.com and they're all free if people like a quiz. I love a
yeah,
quiz.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We love a quiz.
Yeah.
And Gretchen, one thing I love about you and your work is that you're very much about understanding yourself
Yes.
and then helping, like
100%.
setting yourself up for success, really.
Yes. Yes, if I have to say, like, is there one thing that I've really learned from all my time studying this? It's really like there is no one best way. There is no one right way. If somebody's like, here's the secret, it's getting up early, it's starting small, it's, clearing all your clutter. It's like, maybe, maybe, maybe
Mm,
not.
yeah.
If it works for you, that's great. If it doesn't work for you, there's nothing wrong with you. There's other ways to achieve any aim that you want. There are
Mm,
many, many ways to achieve it. And if something isn't working, instead of saying, there's something wrong with me, I'm lazy, I have no self-discipline, what's wrong with me? Maybe I need to try twice as hard. You could say, well,
mhm,
maybe one of the secrets of adulthood is no tool fits every hand. And so it's like, so
mhm.
maybe you need to find a different tool. Like I'm somebody who
Yeah.
cannot meditate. I mean, I have meditated. I've given it 2 really solid tries. I did a silent meditation retreat. It's just not a tool that works for me. And
Mm,
that's fine. Like no tool fits every hand. And so
mm,
there are other ways that I can achieve the aims that other people use meditation for. But it's just not something that works for me. So fine.
yeah. That's really refreshing, actually, to hear a happiness expert say that.
I know. And I also don't like a gratitude journal. Anybody here deeply annoyed by their gratitude journal?
Exclusive or not?
That
No.
was my like gratitude is incredibly important for a happy life. I do not dispute that, but I needed to find other ways to cultivate gratitude because I found a gratitude journal really annoying.
Yeah, brilliant. And currently, like, how would you describe your relationship with yourself right now?
Close. I think we have a very close relationship. I think it's good. I think it's good.
Yeah. I think talking about the different habits and what you need, it's like that changes, doesn't it, over a lifetime, sometimes
It,
over a week, but I think definitely at different chapters of our life, different things will suit us.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the challenges is like it's like the minute you sort of maybe feel like you figured a few things out, maybe something really changes. Like you have a big change in your personal life, like you get married or you get divorced or you have a children or you have an empty nest or you get a new puppy like me and it like throws everything, into like a new pattern. Or you move or you get a new job or you lose your job or you all of a sudden have a very different idea, like maybe you become very devout or maybe you lose your faith or all sorts of things happen which can have very significant consequences for how we want to live our lives and what we want to do with our time, energy, and money. And so there's this constant need for reevaluation.
Sure. And do you, I mean, most people probably would have read some of your work, but can you just talk to us quickly about the catalyst for you getting into the happiness world?
Yes. Well, it was a very inconspicuous moment of my life. I was in a crowded city bus in the pouring rain, and we were just inching along. And so I had one of these rare opportunities for reflection, like we often don't have in the kind of busyness of everyday life. I had this chance to sort of step back and think, well, what do I want from life anyway? And
Mm.
I thought, well, I want to be happy. And I thought, but I don't spend any time thinking about, am I happy? Could I make myself happier? Is it even possible to make yourself happier? Like, if this is the most important thing to me, why am I not spending any time thinking about it? And I thought, well, you know what? I should have a happiness project. That was the word that I used. And I like ran out to the library the next day and got a giant stack of books, science, philosophy, memoirs, novels, anything I could get my hands on about happiness. And it was just a project that was for me. I just wanted to learn. And this is something that happens to me often. I'll get really preoccupied with a subject and do a ton of research and note taking. So this was very familiar to me. It was just going to be for me. But it was so, and it was at this time I was finishing my book, 40 Ways to Look at JFK. So that book, I was sort of in a down period with that where I'd written it and it was locked, but it hadn't yet hit the shelves. So I had a kind of open intellectual space. So I was learning about it, and then the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn, and there were all these things that I wanted to try, and I was like, I wanted to do this and this and kind of experiment on myself, and it just got bigger and bigger, and then finally I thought, well, maybe this could be my next book,
Mm.
and then I decided to write the Happiness Project, and then from there, happiness is so there's so many parts to it.
Mm.
So ever since then, each book has sort of led me to the next book because I'm always like, well, now having seen everything I've seen, now I'm really interested in this, or now I'm really curious about learning more about that. And so they've just unfolded from that original Happiness Project book.
And when was that, Gretchen? When can you?
Was it 2009 or
Okay.
2005? I can't remember.
Okay.
I think it was 2009.
Incredible. And now that you're like weekly podcasting and sending newsletters, and it's all about what brings happiness, and it's just an amazing journey. And I love the fact that like in the podcast, sometimes it's things like when you were talking to your sister and one I listened to recently, it was like packing cubes just bring her so
Yeah.
much joy and happiness that she gifts them to everyone. So it's like
Yes.
happiness can be very simple. It can be something that
Yes.
makes your life a lot easier, or it can be very philosophical and grand and profound.
Well, that's what on the podcast, one of our segments is called Happiness Hack. And the hack is something like packing cubes or like use a weekly pill case to organize your medication. Because you're like, is this a major principle of happiness? No, it is not. Is it even a minor principle of happiness? No, it is not. And yet, sometimes there's a lot of satisfaction for having just like a little solution to a minor problem. Here's an example. Um, so this is like a headset hook. Who knew that these things existed? But it's like I had headphones and earbuds and everything floating all around. And then I'm like, there's a thing where I can just put a hook on my desk and then I just put them on the hook. I am so excited. Or the packing cubes. People are like, they really get immense satisfaction from their packing cubes. So sometimes these little solutions give us a disproportionate lift. So that's the happiness hack section. We talk about many, many transcendent things, but
Yes.
we always include a hack.
Yeah, all equally important, I think. Just a quick question for you then from the chat from
Yeah.
Catherine. Has your concept of happiness changed since you wrote the Happiness Project? That's a good question.
That's a good question. I would say that it has deepened, but it has not fundamentally changed because what I did in the Happiness Project is I really had to lay out kind of the general principles. Like, how do you think about, like, how do you even think about the question of how does one have a happier life? So I had to figure that out. And there were sort of these deep tensions within happiness that I had to grapple with just in terms of happiness. But I think there are things that I understand more and more deeply as time goes on. For instance, in the happiness project, I did understand that we all had to figure it out for ourselves, but I didn't understand like really like how fundamental that was. And when I was writing Better Than Before, that's when I really started to think like, well, everybody says making a to-do list works, but what about the people for whom the to-do list doesn't work? What about those people?
Mhm.
Or what about people like me who love using a calendar and find it like very energizing, but then some people really dislike using a calendar. And like all these patterns. And so I feel like basically the outlines are the same, the architecture of my thinking is the same, but I do feel like it's become much more sophisticated and complicated as I understand sort of the nuances of different aspects of it. And then of course
Sure.
the research is changing too. There are things where there are kind of research principles that have changed along the way.
Mhm.
So that's always kind of interesting too.
Sure. And I'm sure lots of people love to talk to you about their experiences of happiness or what they've learned or how they've applied what you've taught them.
And that's my favorite part. I feel like the world is my research assistant. And what I'm really fascinated by is just examples. And that's what and that I think is really helpful because it's like, if people say like, oh, this always works, it's like, if you're not listening, if it works for you, you might like, yeah, this does always work. But if you're really listening, you're like, but, but it doesn't always work. And if it
Mm.
doesn't always work, why doesn't it always work? So I love getting people's insights, observations, resource suggestions, questions, because I feel like that's where I really get this like a much deeper sense of just the variety of how people see the world.
Sure. And this brings us nicely into my last kind of question, I suppose, before we dive into the book. It's Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK this week, and the overarching theme that they've chosen is community,
Hmm.
to kind of, I suppose, illustrate the importance of it and the power of it for looking after our mental health. And I suppose what you're talking about there is a little bit about community, about the kind of connecting with people and using those people as resources and vice versa. Do you feel community is an important element of happiness?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
humans are intensely social. We're among the most social species on the planet. In order to be happy, we have to have deep, intimate bonds. We have to feel like we belong. We need to be able to confide. We need to be able to get support. And just as important for happiness, we need to be able to give support. And
Yeah.
so anything, when you're thinking about, well, how to spend your time, energy, or money, anything that will deepen relationships or broaden relationships is something that's likely to make you happier. Now, it's
Mm.
interesting about the word community. Just as you were saying that, I'm like, community to me is a little bit like I like a really concrete word. So maybe I like words like neighborhood, maybe,
Yeah.
or nature lovers or something like that. Community, I don't know. To me, that's a little bit of a colorless word. But I don't
Uh-huh.
know. That just occurred to me as you were saying it. I'll have to think that through because one of the things that really has surprised me since I first started writing the Happiness Project is the degree to which words matter and
Yeah.
metaphors matter and different people will respond to different ones. Like when I called the book The Happiness Project, several really well-intentioned smart people said, "Well, you can't call it The Happiness Project because that doesn't sound interesting at all. A project is like homework. Nobody's going to want to read a book that's called The Happiness Project." And I was like, "Really?" Because to me, that sounds delightful. Like I love a project. Like
Yeah.
sign me up. Like and I thought, well, that's just on. But then like the journey. Many people are very compelled by the metaphor of the journey. And that is just something that has never struck a chord with me for whatever
Uh-huh.
reason. Like I
Yeah.
would never use that metaphor myself. And yet clearly it's very powerful because so many people do use it. But even things like, okay, you're going to get back into piano. Are you playing the piano or are you practicing the piano? You
Yeah.
know, are you exercising every day? Or are you training for a marathon? Like different people will respond. So sometimes it's even worth thinking about like, well, what are the words that you're using? And if you're like, ah, community, I don't care about community. It's like, but maybe you care about your neighborhood. Or maybe
Mm.
you care about your fellow students or whatever it might be. It's just it's always interesting. But it's an extraordinarily important aspect to a happier life.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the language, um, the idea of language. I think, yeah, we were talking about like healthy relationships and friendships can be community and sports groups and all that kind of stuff. And another aspect that's come out of it, I was talking to another author today, is about the idea of finding your community. Some people feel very that's it's so abstract. It's almost like, where do I even start? And somebody in
Yes.
the chat, Claire, has actually asked about, do you have any advice for stepping out of your comfort zone? So maybe do you have any advice about stepping out of your comfort zone with regards to relationships or connecting with other people?
Well, here's what I would suggest. And I think for some people this is easier than for others. So again, it's like it could be how this fits into your own personal comfort zone is an individual matter. But I am a big fan of joining groups. But a lot of times there isn't a group that you want to join, in which case I think you should start that group.
Hmm.
I just an idiosyncratic thing about me is I'm a huge lover of children's literature and young adult literature. I read it as an adult. So I don't read it because I think children are interested in it or my children are interested in it. I read it because I have a taste for it, like some people have a taste for thrillers or whatever. Well, come to find out, I know a lot of people who share this taste, and so I'm in two book groups where what we talk about is children's literature and young adult literature as adults. And I had to start those groups because those groups didn't exist. Like, and when I started them, I literally thought I was the only one in New York City like this, right? Because now, because of Twilight and Harry Potter, it's much more common that people acknowledge it. But when I started them, it was pretty unusual. So I started this group, and then I had to kind of look around and find the people who weren't self-identifying this way because it wasn't a thing that people talked about. But then it's become a huge engine of happiness for me. And so, but I had to start that group. And I think
Yeah.
people, there's so many interesting groups. My father is part of a breakfast club where they get together every 3 weeks or 4 weeks and they have breakfast. It's like at a restaurant and they have an interesting speaker who comes and talks about something and then they all ask questions. And it's just this lovely thing that he does. And it's the same people all the time. But somebody has to be the one who's like, I'll send out the email.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do that. And so for your comfort zone, that could be hard. But I think maybe there's a TV show that you love to watch. I love podcasts. And I thought a funny group that I heard about was back when Serial, which was one of the first, I don't know about in the UK,
Yeah.
but in the United States, it was one of the sort of first really, really hit podcasts.
Yeah.
So I knew all these people who had a group called Cereal and Cereal. And Sunday morning, they would all get together and eat breakfast cereal and listen together to the latest episode of Serial and then talk about it.
Yeah.
Cereal and Cereal. Funny, right?
Love it.
I
Yeah.
know a bunch of guys where they would get together and they would read New Yorker profiles from the New Yorker magazine of like famous people, like, and they might read one of Johnny Carson that was written 50 years ago. It's like anybody who see, like, they would take turns picking. So, and then
Mm.
of course, a book club is classic. My father-in-law is in a group where they talk about fly fishing. They don't even go fly fishing. They just talk about fly fishing. You know,
Amazing.
so and I'm a big fan of groups because triad of closure, one of the best, and a secret of adulthood is one of the best ways to make friends is to make friends with the friends of your friends. And so
Uh-huh.
like, Tony, if you and I were going to start a book club, it's like you or whatever club or a Real Housewives club or a bird watching club. You find a few friends, I find a few friends,
Yeah.
I become friends with your friends, you become friends with my friends, or friends become friends with each other. Now we have a dense social network that's much better for a feeling of like belonging and cohesion. It's much more stable. That way, like,
Mm.
let's say you can't come for 6 months. You'll come when you can, and the group is still
Mm.
together. It's a really, really good way to make friends. It's easier to schedule because it's not like a lot of one-off dates. It can be great if you're working on a project together. Maybe you have a group that comes together around like we're gonna clean out a park in this neighborhood, or we're gonna,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. Often working on a project together is an easier way to make friends than just like socializing. Um, so so those are some suggestions I would have for getting
Yeah.
out of your
Great.
comfort zone.
Great suggestions. And I like the idea of like, yeah, find something you're really passionate and nerdy about, and then you'll find other people who are the same. And then you'll,
Documentary films. I know somebody where they would like they would pick it, and then yeah, it's whatever you want it to be.
yeah, sure. Um, okay, let's dive into the secrets of adulthood then.
Okay.
Do you want to tell us first what an aphorism is
Yes.
and
So
why I'm asking you that?
yes. Well, so the reason the book is called Secrets of Adulthood is because nobody knows what an aphorism is, but really what the book is aphorisms. So an aphorism is a short, maybe one or two sentence, general observation about human nature. So it's supposed to be a very brief observation that packs a big punch. And the
Mm,
thing about an aphorism is it's attributed to a particular person, like Oscar Wilde or Warren Buffett or Mark Twain or whoever it might be. It's like so and so said this.
mm,
Whereas a proverb is something where it's folk wisdom. A stumble may prevent a fall.
uh-huh.
Sailors fear fire more than water. These are proverbs that are just floated loose from any individual person saying them. So this, and I've always loved aphorisms and also proverbs. I have huge collections that I've amassed over the years, both of other people's and then also over time, I started pushing myself to write more and more aphoristically because I think there's so much power in brevity, and I really had
Yeah,
to have clear thinking in order to write so succinctly. It's like that old
yeah,
joke. I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one.
yeah.
Um, you have to have a lot of clarity and discipline to write very short.
Hmm.
And yeah, this is essentially a collection of aphorisms written by me.
Yeah, so it's kind of it's big wisdom in short, easy to understand sentences. And yeah, you're right. The power in brevity is amazing, and that is, I suppose, what you've always done is taken big ideas and made them and translate them for us, I suppose.
Yes, that's what I find to be very interesting. Um, yeah, and as I was writing them, I had so many more that are not in the book, and because many of them were sort of mere observations, like a dog doesn't gaze at a waterfall. That is a mere, the tulip is an empty flower. Those are just observations. I think they're interesting. You could include them in a book of aphorisms, but I'm like, they're not really secrets of adulthood.
Yeah,
So I left those out. These are ones that will help you like manage a relationship or end procrastination or make a tough decision. They're like things that you can use like as you're navigating life. That's how I picked up my giant collection, how I picked these. And then I have a bunch of dark aphorisms. These are the ones that are like, I'm like, nobody wants to read all these bleak aphorisms. So I left those out too. So these are the ones that count as secrets of adulthood.
that'll be like a secret, like a little a subgroup for that. And when
Yeah.
you say in the beginning that you wrote this for your daughters, really,
Mhm.
well, that was the inspiration behind it because you wanted to pass on because quite a lot of times we learn wisdom by by making the same mistakes a few times too many, maybe.
Well, yeah. And in fact, I need to remind myself of these secrets just as much as I want to pass them on to them because I definitely make the same mistake over and over or have to keep being reminded of the same lesson over and over for sure.
And so, which was your favorite chapter to write then? Because it's broken down into so I got cultivating ourselves, facing the perplexities of relationships, making things happen, confronting life's dilemmas, and this is my favorite, just the simple secrets of adulthood, which is very we'll read some of those out maybe in a minute. But was there like a particular chapter that you found more challenging to write than another?
Well, I didn't write it like that. I would just write the
Oh,
aphorisms
okay.
as I had an insight or an observation. And then it was later on that I was like, okay, what are the themes that I've been addressing? And so that was sort of very interesting to be like, of everything that what am I writing about? Like, what are my subjects? Because I would just do them as I had thoughts. I don't know about you, but it is very hard to have a thought, I find. Like, so, and I don't think I could sit down and write Secrets of Adulthood for friendship. They had to just come out of experience and reflection and then the structure came later. So I think they were all equally easy and hard to write.
Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of they happened first and then we put them into some kind of
Exactly. Then I
structure.
sorted them into their categories, which they
Yeah.
fell into very neatly. I realized like everyone, I have my sort of my preoccupations. And so it like makes sense that I have like a bunch about friendship because that's really important for a happy life. But as I was writing them, I wasn't like, oh, here's another one about friendship.
Mm. And when do we know we're an adult? Like, when do you think?
Maybe never, for sure. I think maybe adults only exist in the eyes of children, right? When we're children, we think, oh, those are the grown-ups. But then when you
Yeah,
get there, you're like, oh my gosh, like we're just a bunch of idiots running around. Like, where are the grown-ups? So, but there are lessons that we learn. We do
yeah,
learn with time and experience. So, yeah,
yeah. We're all works in progress.
we are for
Some of
sure.
us more progress than others. And
Hmm.
how did you get so wise? Is it through all the reading and research you do? Is it through all the projects? Is it being open to learning?
I don't know that I would claim to be wise,
I
but
feel like you
I
are.
do think about all these things a lot. Yeah, and I try to just really be observing all the time. One thing that I'm doing is I'm always looking for patterns. Like
Yeah.
I'm very interested when different people will say almost the exact same thing. Like I'm like, that's interesting because there are people who are saying exactly the same thing. What are they, especially if it's something that I wouldn't say myself. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I remember with the four tendencies, there's a certain group of people that would say that said to me verbatim, because one of the questions I would ask people to sort of get into their understand how they think about habits is I would say to them, how do you feel about New Year's resolutions? Like that was just a standard question that I would ask. And this group of people would say exactly the same thing, like it had been wired into their brain by a common source. They would say, I will keep a resolution whenever it makes sense for me. I would not wait for January 1st because January 1st is an arbitrary date.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's so interesting because the arbitrariness of January 1st never bothered me. But for many, many people, this is like a major sticking point for them, right? Like they really or take issue with it. And I was like, what is in common among these people? Why are they seeing the world in this respect in the same way? Or like here's another because my next book is about going to be about the empty nest, which I'm rebranding as the open door, which is like when your children leave home.
Mm.
And I noticed this pattern of how people talked about their lives. So I will ask you this, Toni. Are you a book person or a tree person? And here I will define this for you. So a book person is a person who sees their life as a book of short stories. Every once in a while, they turn the page and they turn a new story. They like to reinvent themselves. Like they
Mhm.
welcome like a big, like, let's just turn the page and have a fresh start. Tree people want to be rooted in place. They want to grow, they want to have big rings, they want to have a lot of leaves, but they want to be anchored in one place and grow from there.
Mm.
And so this comes up, you can see in the empty nest phase, because if you, let's say you have a married pair and one of them says, wow, this is great, now we can move to the beach, and the other person says, what are you talking about? Like, how can we turn our back on our lifetime of memories and relationships? It's not that one of them is right and one of them is wrong, but one is a book person and one is a tree person. So what do you think you are? Are you
Mm.
a book person or a tree person, Toni?
I'm a book person for
I'm a
sure.
book person too. Well, very
Yeah.
fitting in that we are in a book club, but but it's not necessarily that. Yeah. So you feel like you're a book person.
Yeah, kind of. I'm kind of excited for new chapters a lot. Maybe I should be more of a tree person and be more
Oh
grounded.
no,
But
actually,
yeah,
I'm a tree person. What am I saying? You're a book person. I'm a tree person.
yeah,
Well, I was wondering if you're a book person because you're like, oh, I moved to Norfolk. It's like, oh, I just did it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
do,
you're a
and
book person.
I don't look back very much.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, and I'm a tree person that wants to be rooted. Well, I mean, I live in New York City, and I remember at one point my husband was like, "Do you think we'd ever move?" And I'm like, "I'm just saying right now, I'm not moving more than 10 blocks in any direction. Like that is the limit of like where we can move. I'm just laying that down right now." And he's like, "Okay, he's a tree person too, so that's fine."
yeah, that's
We
good.
live right around the corner from my in-laws. That's the kind of tree person that he is. But it's good because we're harmonious, right? Because we want the same thing. But even if you don't want the
Yeah.
same thing, I think it's helpful to have a language to talk about it. It's not that one person's right and one person's wrong.
Mm.
It's just that you have different perspectives. So this is like if there's anything that I think gives me insight, it's that I'm constantly looking for, well, how are people seeing the world in a different way? How can
Yeah.
we characterize how they have different perspectives and like how that might play out?
Yeah. And I feel like adulting or becoming an adult is is definitely when you get to a point where you're like, maybe I'm not right about everything. Maybe I have a different perspective than this other person, and maybe I should listen to what they have to say also.
But it's very hard to do that. I think it's just
Oh,
very surprisingly hard. You don't even realize that you're making assumptions.
yeah.
It's so natural for you to see things in a certain way, that it's very hard even to realize how. how much you're not seeing it. Like one thing, so in my book Life in Five Senses, I was talking about the five senses. And one thing that really surprised me is that often people are young adults before they realize that they're colorblind or that they don't have a sense of smell.
Mm.
And you would think, how does a person not know they're colorblind? Like people are talking about colors all the time. Like, how are they not understanding that? Like people are saying, oh, these two colors are different, but obviously they're the same. And it's just like people just assume that people are
Mhm.
basically experiencing the same thing they are. And they kind of,
Yeah.
if they're saying things that don't make sense, it just kind of, they
Yeah.
just kind of move through that. And it's very hard, even with something as tangible as not detecting color differences.
Mm.
Um, and so it was, and that's very concrete. With something that's more subtle, like how do you respond to expectations? Like you
Yeah.
could see why you just think, well, it's kind of funny that other people behave in such a baffling way, but what are you going to do? Like people are people, I guess, instead of
There's always
understanding
other
like,
people,
oh,
Gretchen, isn't it?
yeah,
It's always those
so
other pesky other people.
it's always people.
And I'm like you talked about patterns then, so I would be interested in your take on just patterns for maybe like self-development or what has been what you've seen over the years of writing about self-development and researching and working in this sphere. It's like what have you seen big changes in what people are more interested in? Like what I feel like a few years ago it might have been very much I read a lot about anxiety and now reading more lot about neurodiversity maybe and there's different so I see kind of more trends I suppose based on the books that are coming out and the conversations we're having in the community but I wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I mean, the thing that's been interesting for me is like when I started this, it was all pretty new, and like the idea of positive psychology and studying kind of like flourishing or whatever you want to call it was pretty new. And now I feel like that there's a widespread acceptance of this. It's very common for workplaces to think like, well, how do we have a happier workforce, and
Yeah.
understanding like why that's so important for them to think about. And so there is just a much more when I started writing about it, it was seen as kind of quirky and idiosyncratic, and now I think it's much more common. But you're right, there do send, and I think it tends to follow what kind of big research has come out that's kind of driving the discussion. Like something will come out, and like at least in the United States, there was this huge push around loneliness, like all these studies about loneliness and what are we going to do about loneliness. And then you're right, it's sort of like then the conversation moves on. Um, so I think that's interesting. I mean, to me, what I'm always focused in, and I'm always trying to grab whatever is relevant, is like for the individual person, what is it that they can do in their ordinary life,
Mhm.
given their nature, their circumstances, their temperament, to make their lives happier, healthier, more productive, more creative. So one of the things I don't do, which a lot of people do, which is study trends or think about this country versus that country, or now versus 50 years ago, or men versus women, or this culture versus that culture. Um, or or so, because I'm just like, be that as it may,
Yeah.
what can you do starting tomorrow? So I'm like the very practical kind of Benjamin Franklin, like because it's not that I dispute that organizations and cultures have an enormous role to play. They absolutely do have an enormous role to play, and a lot of people spend a huge amount of time studying that, coming up with policy recommendations, like really working through that. It's just like, it's for me, I'm really interested in like what an actual individual person could do
Yeah.
themselves. It's just the
Yeah.
part that for whatever reason is most interesting to me.
And more help it's more helpful, isn't it? Like I suppose like people need to be able to apply things to their life if they want to make change.
Well, I find it more interesting, but I would have to say, like if a workplace makes an important change, that could influence like a bunch of people all at once. So it's not that that
Mm.
isn't important; it's incredibly important. Or like, let's say you have a city that's like, okay, we've read all these studies about green space, so we're gonna really devote a lot of effort to making this big central green space with like all, this, that, and the other thing, because we think it's going to be great for our community. That could have huge amounts of effect. So I really applaud that other people are studying it. But maybe I do like the sort of the instant gratification, like you don't have to work with a city council and get a green space done. Like you could just do this tomorrow yourself. So I do find that very like, like you can just get that going on your own. You don't even
Yeah.
need to wait for other people to participate. I mean, one thing that is interesting is sometimes people will say to me like, well, I want to do this, but the people in my life don't want to cooperate, or the people in my life don't care. And I'm like, well, don't wait for them. You
No.
know, don't make it, this does, they don't have to buy in. They don't have to participate. They don't have to be interested in hearing about it, which like my husband considers himself probably like an innocent bystander to all this, you know, like he doesn't get involved in all of my like experiments and everything. Though he definitely benefits from me being like, you know, happier and you know, better behaved, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel
but
like
it
he might be
is nice.
unwittingly involved.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
he
yeah.
doesn't know that he's
Right.
part of the research project.
Yes, exactly, exactly. But I do think sometimes it's nice to just say like, well, what can I do just without
Yeah.
waiting for anybody else?
Yeah, brilliant. Should we go through maybe if we could go through a few of the simple truths? Would you be able
Sure,
to
let's
walk me?
do it. Well,
I
let me
might,
explain what the simple truths are.
yeah,
So the secrets of adulthood are like big transcendent ideas, you know, hopefully, like that's my aim, where you will give you a big insight into like a major issue of life. But then at the end, but I can't resist a hack. I love a practical solution. So as I was writing my aphorisms, I had to just like keep a list of my simple secrets of adulthood. And truthfully, I thought my editor would say, Gretchen, these really do not belong in this book. Like, you got to cut them out. But she said, oh, I think they're fun. Let's put them in. So in the back, they're the simple secrets of adulthood. And these are things that are more, they're just kind of like practical, almost tips or hacks.
yeah,
But I do think they're fun and I do think they're useful. And they can make you happier.
for sure. Are you happy with me reading a few out?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love those. So the first one, if you don't know what to do with yourself, go outside or go to sleep.
Always works.
I
Always
mean,
works.
that always works. And guys, if you relate to any of these as I'm reading them, let me know. Um, what about this one? It's okay to ask for help. Where's that come
Why is this so hard?
from?
Just yesterday, I had this big problem and was thinking about it, didn't know what to do. And then I'm like, this is actually a factual question that I know somebody who would factually have an opinion. Why don't I just email him and say, hey, can I exploit your brain and ask you a question? And he was like, yeah, I'm free now. Call me. And I was like, but I had to like go through a whole process, you know?
Do you think most of us are wired to not be very good at asking for help?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm,
And I think part of it is not wanting to be a bother. I think part of it is not wanting to admit we need help. I think part of it is maybe not taking the time to think about whether you know somebody who could help. I think sometimes, so like I knew somebody, right? Like I was like, oh, I know exactly who to ask. But sometimes you really have to think about it, or maybe you have to like go through, like you don't have a direct connection. You're like, oh, I have to ask my cousin about that guy that he worked with, who blah, 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 blah. You know, it takes a little bit of reflection,
yeah.
and maybe a little bit of like inconvenience to sort of get to the place. Um, I think also sometimes people really want the perfect answer or the right answer. So they don't want to just ask somebody. Like I remember like 1,000 years ago when I started my blog, there are all these things you could do to start your blog. This one, that one, the other one. And I was sort of overwhelmed. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask somebody I know who's really smart, who has a blog, and whatever they do, I'm going to do. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. If it doesn't work, I can fix it later. But otherwise, I'm just going to delay and delay and delay, like looking for the perfect answer. So
Yeah.
again, it's like ask for help because it's like if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. Um, Rather than feeling like, oh, this is a problem that I need to solve like on my own.
Mm. Also, you did say at the beginning when we were talking about community and connections that actually offering help to other people is a really important part of happiness.
It is. Giving support is a really important part of happiness.
Yeah.
Yes,
So you're giving
it
someone else
is.
the opportunity to up their happiness levels by doing that.
Yes, yes.
This is a good one for spring. If you forgot you owned an item, you can probably get rid of it.
How many times you're like, my goodness, like when I was cleaning out some shelves and I found this giant metal mixing bowl. I mean, huge. And I looked at it and I thought, you know, that I don't think I should get rid of that because that probably would really come in handy to have something big. And I'm like, well, we haven't needed it in like 1,000 years, and I didn't even know I had it. So probably not needed. So I got rid of it, and I never thought about it again in terms of like actually using it. Yes, because if you didn't know you had it, you probably don't need it.
Yeah, amazing. And do you have any other like secrets of adulthood spring cleaning, decluttering tips or advice?
Well, you know, I wrote a whole book, Outer
I
Order,
know,
Inner
I feel like this is
Calm,
a
because
whole other interview,
no,
but
because I was so interested in this question. Like, it's not true for everybody, but for most people, outer order contributes to inner calm, kind of to
yeah,
a disproportionate degree. Like, you get, at least I do, and I think a lot of people do get a huge disproportionate surge of energy and cheer. from just like creating organization in their space. So just a couple things for this. One is follow the 1 minute rule. Anything you can do in less than a minute, do without delay. So if you can put a mug in the dishwasher, if you can put a piece of paper in a file, if you can put your coat on a hook, this just gets rid of like the scum of clutter on
Mm,
the surface of everyday life. And another thing is if you feel yourself sort of overwhelmed with kind of tasks, like minor tasks that are not a big deal, but they kind of like weigh on your mind, like, oh gosh, I've got to like replace that light bulb, or I should get out a screwdriver and tighten the screws on my doorknob or whatever. One thing you can do is you can have power hour, so which is keep a list of all those like nagging tasks, and then once a week for 1 hour, just try to do as many as you can. And it is
yeah,
astonishing how many little nagging tasks you can do in a very short time if you just like sit down and do it. And it's, you know, you're not going to finish your list the first week, but if you do that week after week, it is astonishing how much you can get done. So
yeah.
those are just like a few things to like clear to create more order.
Brilliant. And that kind of like the mental energy that goes into just
Huge.
knowing that there's shit to do, but you're not doing it. It's huge, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Well, one of my secrets of adulthood is nothing is more exhausting than the task that's never started. I
Yeah.
one time had an email that I had delayed. I had procrastinated about writing for 2 months. I'm not kidding. It was like on every to-do list. I like bumped it, bumped it, bumped it. And then I sat down to do it one morning, first thing in the morning, because I'm a morning person.
Yeah.
Took me like 40 seconds.
And then it's gone and done.
And then it's gone.
And
And
you
then
can
it's
give
done.
yourself a pat on the back for
Yeah.
that. Don't buy things until you need them, store them at the store.
Yeah, that's good for overbuyers. And that's another distinction. Some people are underbuyers, some people are overbuyers. Overbuyers will often be like, well, maybe I'll need that, or that could be useful, or that could make a good gift. It's like store it at the store, and if you need it, you can go get it. They'll keep it there very nicely for you.
Brilliant. Is there an aphorism from the book that has been a favorite of people as you've been going doing the book tour and talking to readers?
That is really interesting. It's always very interesting to see what resonates most with people. So one is we care for many people we don't particularly care for,
Mm.
is one that a lot of people have mentioned.
Do you mean
Um,
that? And is that about looking after people or just caring there about their opinion?
It's more about like you don't really care for them, but you still do care for them. You know, like maybe it's a member of your family that you have a lot of disagreements with, but still in the end, they're still a part of your family. Or it's you know, like I remember I have a friend from childhood who I see periodically, you know, and then I was like, you know, she's really mean.
Mm.
She's very mean. It dawned on me, and I'm like, yeah, she is kind of mean. But
Yeah,
it really doesn't even matter because, you know, even if I don't particularly care for her, I still care for her.
sure. Okay. So, and are people having, as you're speaking to them and meeting them, do you do readings from the book?
No, usually they'll come up in conversations like this where
Okay.
somebody will mention the ones that struck them, which is always so interesting to me because I do see how which ones kind of resonate the
Yeah.
most. But what's also interesting is that people will have a different interpretation. So like one of my favorites, like that I need in my own life the most is working is one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination. And what I had in mind with that aphorism is like sometimes when I should be doing the hard work of original writing, I start doing research, right? Research, because it looks like I'm working because I'm like, I'm not like lying on the sofa watching TV or talking to a friend on the phone, but I'm really
Yeah.
goofing off. I'm just like doing what I feel like instead of doing the hard work of original writing. So working is one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination. But
Sure.
somebody said to me, oh, I read it differently. To me, it's that sometimes it's easier and more pleasant to work. And so you use your work life as a way to put off dealing with like all the problems and challenges of
Mm,
home. So
sure.
working is one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination in that it's, you know, giving you an out for facing a different kind of work. So I thought, well, that's a very valid interpretation as well.
Sure. So it's how it relates. Yeah, it's how it
Yep.
relates to you.
Yeah.
Okay, what one final aphorism from the book then? And then if anybody has a quick question, then share it in the chat. I've got one more question to ask from the chat as well. Things we get for free can cost a lot of time, energy, and money.
Oh, I mean, right? It's like you get some freebie at a conference or somebody's like, "Oh, do you want this lamp?" or, you know, and you're just like, "Okay, now I'm stuck with it. What am I going to do with this mug that I don't even like?" How many tote bags do I have? I have so many tote bags. I find it so hard to turn down a tote bag. Each one is a little bit different. I'm like, well, this one has a zipper and this one has an outside pocket. But it's like, I don't need any tote bags. So now when somebody is like, do you want a tote bag? I'm like, no, I do not want a tote bag because I'm losing an entire closet to tote bags.
I
No.
think another mark of adulthood would probably be being able to say no to free stuff as well. Just because it's
That is
really
so true. That would
doesn't
make
mean
a
you need
great
it.
thing. Well, there's room in the back to write your own. You should definitely write that in your back.
I'm going to write that
Maturity is
down.
turning down free stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. That's a great one. Great addition.
So Gretchen, just before you go, one question from the chat. Somebody asked about what are your favorite podcasts to listen to? Because you mentioned that you're a big podcast
Oh,
fan.
I love podcasts. Well, reading, I love Backlisted, which is backlisted books. There's Secret Life of Books, that's kind of classics. I love the podcast Hard Fork, that's all about technology. My sister, who's the co-host of the Happier podcast with me, has a podcast called Happier in Hollywood, which I would love even if it wasn't my sister who's the host, but of course that does add pleasure to it. Um, I love In Our Time, history podcast from the BBC, or history, culture, literature. I listen to all philosophy. I listen to all the different kind of verticals that they have. Um, what else do I like? Those are some of my favorites, I think.
And when do you listen to all these podcasts?
When I'm walking my dog or when I'm walking. So I live in New York City, so a lot of times I'll be like, well, if I can read on the subway, I will. But sometimes it's just like such a short trip. I don't want to deal with having to carry a book around all evening. Or if it's going to be really crowded, I think it's going to be hard to like manage having a book. Yeah, just when I'm putting on my makeup, when I'm unloading the dishwasher, like I'm not somebody, and I write about this in Life in Five Senses. I'm not really a music person. I don't really listen to music much. So I have a lot of times, and I don't like audiobooks particularly. When I read, I want to read a
Oh,
paper
wow.
book.
Okay, sure.
And so I have a lot of time for podcasts, which I love.
Do you narrate your own book, your audiobooks?
I do.
You
I
do.
do.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Always discover books that I've been words that I've been mispronouncing my whole life. That's always a little bit sobering to realize that Jim cracks. It's Jim cracks, people, not Gim cracks, which is what I'd been saying.
That's a lesson.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think it's time
Well,
to
th
let you go.
well, thank you. This is so fun. Thanks everybody for letting me come. I love reading and I love talking about books and I love self-improvement. So it's like a
Yeah,
fantastic combination.
perfect combination. Well, good luck with the book. I mean, you don't need it, already bestseller. We've loved it, and we've been sharing links as we go. So, Gretchen, if you need to go, then we'll say good night or
Good
good afternoon
night.
to you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.